Hey everyone, it's Dr. DeCubellis here, and today I am joined with attorney John Risvold, and we are here to answer some of the most commonly asked questions when it comes to personal injury, whether it's from a treating perspective, whether it's from an attorney perspective. So you guys have emailed us in or just asked in person a bunch of questions, so I put together a list of the top ones that are answered, and we're going to try to get through as many of these as possible. But first, John, thanks for being here with me.
Hey, really, thank you for having me. It's really a great opportunity to talk to some of the people in the community and really give them an inside look at what you do and what I do and really how it can help them. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and a lot of these questions too, they're things that we both get asked a lot, and we want to get them answered so people really know what to do in these situations, because some of them are time sensitive, and when they don't do the right thing at the right time, it really can end up biting them in the butt,
Yeah, really.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first thing is, when we talk about a personal injury attorney, they're different than normal attorneys. So the question I always get asked is, how is a personal injury attorney paid?
Sure. So I work on what's called a contingency, which means I only get paid if I win. I'm the kind of attorney that I get a percentage of whatever we're able to recover for the injured person. If we're not able to recover anything, there is no fee, there is no cost. I always tell people, say for instance, we took your case all the way through a jury trial, and the jury said that you're not entitled to any compensation. You don't owe me anything. There is no bill, there's no cost. So my fee is simply just a percentage of anything that we're able to win, and only if we win.
Makes sense. So the onus is really on the attorney,
yeah,
to make sure they do a good job.
Absolutely, absolutely. The way that I look at it is I'm taking all the risk off of their plate. I'm the one that's dealing with the insurance company. I'm the one that's taking on all the risk if we have to go to court or anything else, so they don't have to worry about it. They can deal with doctors and focus on their health and get better, so they don't have to deal with the red tape and everything else that goes on with the insurance company.
100%. And that leads into the next question I know I get asked a lot is, can they deal or can they negotiate with the insurance company themselves?
You certainly can. I wouldn't recommend it in the same way I wouldn't have a brain surgeon perform heart surgery on me. You think about it this way. Think about how many attorneys that the insurance company has. Don't you think you should have at least one? And the other thing I don't think people consider is you certainly can negotiate with the insurance company, but while they've spent billions of dollars to convince you that they're your friend and they're on your side and they're working for you, they're not. They're interested in paying you as little as possible, as quickly as possible, so that they can mitigate their risk and so they can get rid of this case. Your best interest is to speak to an expert who negotiates every single day professionally, which is what a personal injury lawyer really does. You see a lot of the TV lawyering, and that's the fun stuff, right, in front of a jury or in court, and I love that stuff, don't get me wrong, but the majority of my time is spent professionally negotiating with insurance companies to get them to do the right thing.
Well, and a lot of it too is there's a big difference too if you're dealing with your own insurance versus you're dealing with someone else's insurance. If you're going through the person who hit you's insurance, they have no reason to be nice and to help you out because you're not even the one paying the premiums.
Right. And you create no risk for them at all, because you could go file your own lawsuit on your own behalf, but I was always told by a law professor of mine that a person who represents themselves has a fool for a client. Don't try to represent yourself in court. The insurance company knows who the lawyers are who take cases to court and who try cases before juries. They know who the serious lawyers are who do the serious work, and those lawyers will help you get back on your feet, get connected to whoever you need to get connected to, and get your life moving forward without you having to worry about negotiating with an insurance company that's really not on your side at all.
Right. And the whole time you should be worried about getting yourself better, and you shouldn't be having to take calls from the insurance company because they're recording everything too.
Yeah.
They're looking for a slip up, so it's not advised. You can do it, but it's not the best thing for your own interest.
Anything you say to an insurance company can and it will be used against you, period.
Yep. All right, with that on top of mind here, next question I get is, can I use my own auto insurance for my doctor's bills? The answer is yes, but with that too, at least from my perspective, what I notice is it kind of depends on if you're going to have coverage. You can use it, but it doesn't mean it's definitely going to cover anything. You have to, it depends on what kind of policy you have, if there is med pay, how much med pay there is. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. So just saying I'm going to go through my own insurance doesn't necessarily mean all your bills are going to be covered. you need to know exactly what your insurance does cover, and even at that time, it might not be at 100%.
The only thing I'll say, because this is definitely your area of expertise, the only thing I'll say is I see a lot of clients who immediately expect that the at-fault driver's insurance is going to pay for their bills. And that's not how it works ever. The at-fault driver's insurance is never going to pay for your bills. What they're going to do is they're going to basically cut you a check at the end in the form of a settlement for the total amount of your bills plus money for pain and suffering, loss of normal life. They're not going to pay bills as you go. They're not interested in helping you. So really, I think it's imperative, work with your doctor to figure out where and how your bills can get paid and by whom. The doctors really, and the doctor's offices are really going to be, your office is going to be the expert in determining, does the med pay help here or not, or what's the best way to get paid.
Yeah, because I mean, if it's something you pay for as part of your premium, it makes sense to use it, because the goal when it comes to any kind of accident injury claim is that the person who is not at fault shouldn't have to pay the bills. It should be either their insurance, the person who hit the insurance, or the attorney who goes through and gets a settlement, or we go to court and get it covered that way. But it shouldn't be that people are having to pay out of pocket the whole time.
Right, absolutely.
That's kind of the way this is all set up, and the reason why we answer these questions, so people understand that.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a big question I get asked a lot. How long does it take to settle a case?
It depends on how complex the case is. It depends on how serious the injuries are. If you have minor injuries and it's a very simple case like a rear end accident, it won't take very long. It'll take however long it takes for you to get better and finish your treatment. If it's a very complex case that involves broken bones and you need to wait for a bone to heal and then you need rehab afterwards, then it's going to take longer. I have cases that have settled as quickly as a couple weeks. I've had cases that have lasted several years. And really what it is there's two things that I think drive the timeline of a case. The first one is, how seriously are you injured and how quickly do you get better? Because you don't want to leave any bills out unpaid by, that you're responsible for now that the at-fault insurance didn't pay for. That's number one. And number two is, how willing is the at-fault insurance company to actually be fair and pay fair value, fair justice value for the damages, the harms, and the losses that they caused? And honestly, a lot of times they're just not willing to do it. If they were willing to do it every time, I wouldn't have a job. I would have nothing to do every day. But they're not willing to do it. And that's why we find ourselves in court often. We find ourselves having to go to court to litigate these cases because the insurance companies don't want to help people. And if they did, it would be a much smoother process and go much faster. But the reason cases take that long is primarily because the insurance company drags them out.
Yep. And like you said, every case is going to be different when it comes from a diagnostic standpoint. So that's why it's always important to get the right diagnosis in the beginning, because we don't want to be going back and having to change something at a later date because they didn't heal properly and now everything's just muddled and screwed up. So diagnosis is important, but also too when it comes to treatment, everyone's going to respond a little bit differently. Everyone lives a different life. They work different jobs. They have different amounts of kids or no kids, and different things can irritate or aggravate those types of injuries too. Yeah. So sometimes it's also finding out that, hey, you know what, we're still in pain, but we've reached permanency at this point. And that's important too, but we have to make sure it's defined as to what is permanent about it, and make sure we rate all of those things, because then it gives you, the attorney, the leverage to know, okay, we're not talking about getting better, we're talking about maintaining at this point.
Right.
And that's a totally different thing too. So there's a whole medical side, because you really should never be settling while you're treating.
No,
that
never,
doesn't make
ever.
any sense.
I will never settle a case until a client is either at maximum medical improvement or they're done treating. Period. Yep. I'm not going to do it, no matter how much they want me to settle it.
Right. And that's from a client's best interest, because you don't really know what the overall injuries are going to be, because you could be progressing well. Even let's say you have a partial tear of a labrum, you're progressing well, and then all of a sudden you just hit a wall, or it's re-aggravated through something you're doing in your everyday life, and now you end up needing surgery. If you would have settled before, none of that matters anymore.
Yeah, I just handled this exact case where the client had a torn labrum, but she didn't want to go through surgery. And the insurance company offered $38,000 to settle it before we filed a lawsuit. We filed the lawsuit because she was continuing to go through her treatment. She gets the surgery, and we ended up settling it for over $300,000. So the value of cases change dramatically based on where you are in the timeline. And if you really try to rush it, that's what the insurance company wants. They want to rush it, so they pay $38,000, which is still a lot of money, but it's a lot less than $300,000. which is what they should have paid and ended up paying.
Yep. Oh, definitely. All right, which goes, these are flowing really nicely. How much is a case worth?
Yeah, the case is worth as much as has been taken from you by the at-fault driver. What are your harms? What are your losses? What are the actual human injuries? The case is based on a lot of things. It's based on the value, fair market value of your medical bills, however much those might be. You know, an ambulance ride's like $1,500. If you have to go to the ER, that's like 10 grand. And while you might have health insurance or some other means to pay for that, you know, you may only have a copay if you go to the emergency room. There's still a $10,000 bill that's floating out there that the at-fault insurance should pay for. The other thing that I think a very good lawyer should consider, and I always consider, is what are the actual human losses? What has been taken from you? Pain and suffering is the common sort of parlance, but really it's just the human harms and losses. Is it impossible for you now to bend over and tie your shoes? Does it hurt every time you take a breath? Does it hurt when you lay down to go to sleep? You can't sleep because, you know, there's some sort of injury that impedes that. And then things sort of snowball from there. You lose sleep, you lose time at work, all of those things. The case is worth whatever we are able to prove has been taken from you.
Yep. And that's where medical becomes a very big portion of it, because if there's no injury that's diagnosed and there's no treatment, it really doesn't add much credence to the settlement being high, because there was no impact on their life, at least from that medical standpoint.
Right.
So it's always important with that, but also too, it's really important to make sure that we're very specific in what's going on. So what's always a good idea is when the patients are getting close to or done with treatment, and we get to that maximum medical improvement, looking at their duties under duress and their loss of lifetime enjoyment activities, we say, hey, prior to this, they were able to work 8 hours a day sitting on the computer, no issue. Now they can only work 3 hours. Their pain level's at a 5 after 3 hours. If they go to 4 hours, it gets to an 8 and they have to stop. That's a huge change, especially if we talk about a 45-year-old who is going to be working for another 20 years. That's how things compound. That's how these case values grow. But you need to make sure all the bases are put into place to actually grow that case. And things like that can make your life a lot easier as an attorney, versus someone who just comes in and says, hey, you know what, I want you to sue for me, but they haven't gotten any medicals or anything.
Right.
Puts you in a difficult position.
The most important thing in a case, not just a claim or trying to settle somebody's claim or anything else, in what I call a case, meaning something I can actually take in front of a jury, is the doctor's opinion about what caused the injury and the doctor's opinion about what the future prognosis looks like. Those two things, in my opinion, are the most important thing your doctor can do for you beyond getting you better.
Right. All right. Okay, which these were really well written out. All right. Why does it matter who I treat with? Well, I think we kind of answered that a little bit, but the biggest thing is, you want to make sure you go to someone who actually works with personal injury claims. Cases with personal injury are much different than your normal, something that happens at home type of case. Not only in the way that they're actually processed, but the way that the exams have to go, the way everything documented, but also the way that they're paid, and the way insurance works. It's just a completely different ballgame. So you have to make sure that obviously it's someone who knows what they're doing. The other thing though too is when it really comes down to that diagnosis. The big problem that I see is a lot of people, or a lot of doctors who want to try to do PI but don't know how or haven't been properly trained. They'll come in and they'll try to treat them as a normal case, meaning their diagnosis is like back pain, neck pain, muscle sprain or strain. Those things don't really offer much value in the way of the case value, but they also don't usually match up with how the patient ends up at the end of treatment with their when they reach that MMI, maximum medical improvement. So there becomes a gap now, because it's like they were diagnosed with this, they were treated this way, but that doesn't add up with how they ended up. So something's wrong, and now we have a big problem on our hands.
Right. No, I agree. I think from my perspective, so much of my job truly is storytelling. It's telling the story of how you got hurt and then how you hopefully got better. And if a doctor's doing their job and doing it well, I've seen your notes, and your notes are exemplary. They're exactly what I wish all the other notes looked like, to be honest. And the reason is because back strain doesn't tell me anything. Back sprain doesn't tell me anything. But when you dive into the specifics and you really get into what actually is mechanically wrong here, what's really going on in the body that is causing this pain and causing these issues, then we start to be able to actually tell a story to an insurance company or a judge or a jury in a way that really explains this. Because look, I've rolled my ankle and sprained my ankle, right? I've also torn ligaments in my ankle, and both are technically a kind of a sprain, but one's very different than the other. And if I had a doctor who wasn't diagnosing me as anything but sprain or strain, I might not have ever had my ankle, fixed the way I needed it to so that I could run or play basketball or do whatever I needed to do again. It's just really, really important you dive down to specifics.
Yes, very, very true. All right, let's see here. Next one. Should I wait to see if the pain goes away? Okay, that is one that I see people ask me a lot, especially before they make their initial appointment. The problem with this is twofold. If you have pain after an accident, there's a reason for it. So no matter what it is, you want to make sure it's diagnosed. We don't know whether it's going to be something major or something minor, but we need a record of it and have record of you getting checked out, because at that point, if it does become something bigger, at least there's that record of you getting checked out.
Right.
And so you don't want to wait till it goes away. The other thing too, on the flip side of this, is that if you don't always necessarily have pain immediately right after, just with the way the endorphins are going through your system, sometimes it can take a few days before you start noticing the severity of the pain, and that can be okay too, but you want to make sure you get it checked out as soon as possible. If you're waiting 30 days, 60 days, 180 days, it's going to be so difficult to try to prove that it was linked to the accident. So much other things have gone on in your life. So it's always better to get checked out as soon as possible. And I like to recommend patients, when they're actually at the scene of the accident, go to the hospital. Get checked out, because if nothing else, we're ruling out all the major issues, and then that helps us further. So it's always better to go there instead of declining and then trying to go to the hospital 5 days later. Go immediately. Then if you can't get in with your primary care right away, try to get in as soon as possible. And then when they make sure that it's not something that you're going to need a prescription for, or we're not going to need major surgery, then you can kind of come in to someone like me. But we want to make sure there's definitely that track record of them getting checked out, because it shows that there actually was a problem and they were worried about getting better, not just trying to file a claim.
Certainly. I agree with you 1,000%. My rule of thumb that I tell every client is always call an ambulance and always go with them to the emergency room, period. End of discussion. That is something you should do every single time, no matter how injured you feel at the scene of a crash or you think that you are. You need to be in the hands of a professional as soon as you possibly can. The other thing too, when you're talking about waiting 60 days or 90 days, like, talk about making the insurance company's job easier. Yeah. All they're trying to do is prove that this crash didn't cause your injuries, and you just gave them a 3-month window where you didn't get any medical treatment at all. And then suddenly you pop up and say, oh yeah, that crash that I had way back when, the one I had back in January, well, it's June now and I feel terrible, so now I'm going to go to the emergency room and treat. Good luck. Those are nearly impossible to prove.
Yeah, and unfortunately I've had some patients who do that, and I can see how the mechanism of injury would have caused those issues, but there's just too much time in between to really be able to prove that. So you want to make sure you don't wait and you go as soon as possible. All right. Okay, next question. How soon should I contact an attorney?
From the scene of the crash. Truly. And I don't say that to sound like an ambulance chaser. I think that there are some very important phone calls that you can and should make within the first 48 hours of a crash. The first is 911. Make sure an ambulance comes, make sure you get taken care of and treated. The second one is make a call to your primary care doctor or whoever sees you after you've left the emergency room. Do it as soon as you can so you can get in as soon as you can. The third call would be to a lawyer. And the reason is because in the first 48 hours, the insurance company is going to call you. They're going to say something like, we understand, it's our fault, I'm very sorry you're dealing with this. We're willing to pay for 3 visits of physical therapy and we'll give you $500. And a lot of people say, oh, hey, yeah, free $500, that's great. And then 6 months later, they need a cervical fusion surgery, or they need some sort of tendon repair, or they need prolonged physical therapy that costs tens of thousands of dollars, and they're on the hook for it now because they signed away their rights right away. You want to talk to a lawyer as soon as you can, because they're in the business of protecting your rights and protecting you. You need somebody that's actually working for you, not working to pay you quickly to make you go away.
Yeah, And especially now, just with technology increase, now they're sending things over DocuSign to get you to sign. Okay, we will pay for the ambulance as long as you sign this document, and in there you've given away your right to sue them. And so you never want to sign anything. You should never be signing anything about any insurance. I don't care if it's your own insurance. You shouldn't be signing anything until you talk with an attorney, because they're going to use a lot of legalese type speak, and you need to know exactly what that means and how it pertains to you. And again, they're not looking out for your best interest. Anyone who's trying to get you to settle at the scene, or it's just mind-boggling, because they don't have your best interest. The insurance company calling you and said, hey, you know what? No, you're in an accident. We're going to contact you in a month, let you see how it's going. But if you have any questions, you can give us a call. That'd be a totally different story, but they're not going to do that.
No, not at all. And the beauty of having a lawyer on your side is the insurance company can't talk to you anymore. They're not allowed to. They have to go through me. So I know how the game is played. I used to work for insurance companies before I got the opportunity to work for people. So I know the game, and I know how they're playing it. And you want somebody that's actually working for you and that's actually has your best interests at heart.
Right. Okay. All right. So next one. What if my car doesn't have that much damage? So this one is really interesting, because I've seen this on both sides. I've seen this by insurance companies trying to use this to try to get rid of or diminish the settlement. And I've also seen this by patients, because they've been conditioned to think that, hey, there wasn't that much damage to my car, I must not be injured that much. Interesting thing about this is that there's absolutely no relationship to car damage and injury. Studies have been coming out, and there was one that just came out last year that proved this again. And you have to think, you can almost use this notion against them, because if there was enough force of a car to dent a metal bumper, and we have flesh and bone and tendons here, what do you think happened to inside your body? Because as we know from physics, force doesn't dissipate. That power has to be transferred through something, and it's transferred through that car into your body, and something has to happen with that. So there's absolutely no relationship there, and it really, if you feel anything, or if there's any kind of damage to the car, it's even more that you should get checked out.
Yeah, the way I like to explain it to a jury is, we're sitting in these chairs, and if I ran up from behind and I pushed on the chair as hard as I could, you might fall out of the chair, you might get whiplash, that might hurt your back or your neck. It's going to do no damage to the chair, but it's going to hurt you. And there's a really high likelihood that when you're in a rear end crash, something exactly like that is going to happen, because the car is designed to take a crash. They're crash tested. Our bodies are not crash tested. We're not intended to ever be in a crash. That's not the way we're designed. So, it's very, very common that even very low speed crashes, because of the physics you're talking about, can cause really devastating injuries. And so that's another, in my opinion, insurance company trick to try to convince people, well, there's no damage to the car, so there must not be damage to the person. It's just not how it works in the real world.
Right, yeah, it makes no sense. All right, we talked about this a little bit, but I want to go into a little more detail about it. Is it important to call the police after an accident at the scene?
Yeah.
The answer is 100% yes.
Yes.
And it's yes for a couple different reasons. So I'll kind of tackle it first, and then you can pick up where I left off. The reason is, you want the police to come out so that way they document everything. You got to have documentation. They'll be able to actually, and sometimes they'll put who's at fault on there.
Yeah.
Sometimes they won't, but sometimes they will, and that just helps you out anymore. They say that this was the at-fault party. It also puts documentation of the types of cars that were involved. They'll put what kind of damage they saw. They'll put the time of day, where it was, because you're not going to remember all this stuff. So this way they document everything, and then it can be used by you further down the road. So that's the best thing. But then also they're going to make sure that your car gets taken care of. If it needs to be towed, they're going to make sure that you get into the ambulance. So they're going to kind of take over that mediator at the scene. And again, they're going to document everything. So there's no reason not to call the police.
I agree 100%. Documentation is key. It's very, very important. The other thing that I'm seeing more and more is, when we did driver's ed, we learned if you're in a crash, you exchange information with someone, right? You give them their information. So many times, my clients are getting insurance information of the at-fault driver that's expired, that isn't active at the time. They have no insurance coverage. They're lying about the amount of insurance. If a police officer comes out, they run all that information through their system, and they make sure it's legit. And so if you have that sort of added level of protection from the officer, I think you're just really setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, And it's especially important because we are not a no-fault state.
Right.
So
Right.
you've got to make sure that you are protecting yourself. Okay, so let's go on 2 more here. You brought this up a second ago about whiplash. So what is whiplash and how is it related to injuries, pain, symptoms, and all of that? So let's talk a little bit about whiplash. Whiplash, what it means is that, especially when we talk about your neck or your cervical spine, but it can also be for your lumbar spine too, it's anytime your body's going to move forward and back in a rapid motion. So there's a couple main things that happen with this. First of all, because your body's moving that rapidly, it's not something that you were designed to do. So it causes injury. It causes injury in the low back, which a lot of people don't normally think of because we've got a lap belt that goes around. It only stops part of our lumbar spine from moving, but not the rest. So we start to see especially things with like spondylolisthesis that happen around the L4, L5 area from that lap belt just being there. And it doesn't necessarily take a lot because you have to remember too at what speed you were going relative to them, and there's a lot of physics involved. The other thing that really happens with this is when we have that rapid succession, we have ligaments that run down the front and the back of the spine, and their job is to make sure that all the segments and your spinal column are moving together as one motor unit. But when that whiplash happens, they become overstretched or injured or damaged. This is important because ligaments don't heal 100%. So if we have a ligament injury, it means we're going to have a permanent injury. The reason this all happens is within the ligaments, we have collagen and elastin that go in there, and that's actually what helps us create that motion. But when they injure, we don't create more elastin, just more collagen. So because of that, they're not as elastic, which means they're not as flexible, which means not only you're more prone to injury, but there's going to be certain positions or movements that are going to cause more symptoms because now we're putting pressure on the nerve fibers in those areas. All that's really important to document. We have to make sure we document all of that. And when it comes to whiplash, there are certain specific tests you have to do that you would not normally do, otherwise you can't document them. When it comes to certain range of motion, it's not normally normal range of motion that's going to dictate it, but if we look at range of motion under overpressure, or if we do things like digital motion x-ray, we can see those ligament instability issues. And then when we know that, there's certain specific treatments you have to do, but also it shows you exactly why they're not healing and how we have permanency, and it just helps kind of build the case. So that's why whiplash is so important.
If you're ever wondering why you need to work with a very good doctor, that is why you need to work with a very good doctor. If your doctor can't explain that to you, explain exactly what whiplash is, why it hurts you so much, why it is far more serious than we think that it is, then you need to find a new doctor. Really. That is vital. I mean, to be able to explain that to people, for them to understand it, and also you're explaining it to me. Like, I'm not a doctor, you know. I try to learn the medicine so that I can help people, you know, argue their cases and tell their stories, but you know, the only way I learn it is by listening to you explain it to me, or reading, or whatever it might be. And it's vitally important that your lawyer understand that medicine too. So, you know, whiplash is a serious thing. Understanding that it's not just your neck, it's your back, all those things. Putting those puzzle pieces together is huge for an injured person. It's just awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. The other thing too, you know, to keep in mind is when we talk about just personal injury as a whole, the same thing with doctors and with attorneys, we have to do continuing education.
Yeah.
However, a lot of the continuing education, we can kind of choose our path as to what we want to go in. So with that, you want someone who's chose to keep up on all of the new personal injury laws, all of the new personal injury research that's coming out, diagnosis, all the documentation, because that's how we're going to be able to help the client or the patient, because we actually have that knowledge. Because if you just take someone who doesn't have that, or doesn't even have the experience, who's straight out of school, you're probably not going to get the best results that you wanted.
Right, and just like with doctors, lawyers are the same way. I only handle personal injury cases only on behalf of injured people. I'm not going to be able to do a will for you. I don't know how to do it. I'm not going to be able to handle your traffic ticket because I'm not an expert at that. But this is something I'm an expert in. And when you drill down even a little deeper, all of my continuing education primarily is focused on 3 things: telling stories to a jury, but also brain injuries and spine injuries, because those are the things that I see most common, and those are the things that I see that need the most amount of help from doctors and the most amount of treatment. They're also the things that insurance companies seem to think are the least valuable, even though in my opinion the spine and the brain are the 2 most valuable things in your entire body.
Yes.
But you want to have a doctor and a lawyer who are focused on not only their education, their practices, but their continuing education in an area that is specifically going to help you.
Yes. All right. So what is something that commonly goes undiagnosed in accident injury cases? Well, I'll tell you right now, the one thing that commonly goes undiagnosed is going to be ligament issues. Ligament injuries, the most common one, or one of the most severe ones, is called alteration of motion spinal integrity, AOMSI, and that's really important because not only is it permanent, but with each segment that's involved, it comes with a 25% whole body impairment rating. Now, to an attorney, if you are diagnosed with a 25% whole body impairment rating, that means that, hey, we got to get some more money because you are going to be impaired for the rest of your life with a quarter of your body. So that's
Right.
huge.
Right.
But you have to make sure everything kind of lines up with that. So that's why ligament injuries are not diagnosed as much as they should, because doctors don't know what they are. They don't know how to find them, and if you don't know how to find them, you can't diagnose them. And that's also why we'll see a lot of people who go through different kinds of therapies. They hit a wall, they don't get any better, and then it's just kind of like, well, we're not sure, because they were diagnosed with a sprain or strain, and at that point, they're kind of just, the system kind of let them down.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure you go through it the right way, because also, from your attorney standpoint, if that happened to you and you were diagnosed with a sprain, strain, and then you didn't get any better, and now it's 3 months later after your 3 months of PT you went through on that diagnosis, you're pretty much out of options at that point.
Really, you really are. And that's, again, it goes back to, I think, the centerpiece of everything we're talking about, which is documentation. Like, the sooner you can get into a doctor, the sooner you can get documented, the sooner you find these things out, the better, because you're right, it does increase the value of your case. And there might be issues about the value of your case. There might not be enough available insurance, right? Illinois only requires you to carry $25,000 worth of insurance, which is not a lot. But if there is available insurance, that's going to ensure that you get more of that so that you can use it to help you as you age and as you progress, because you're not going to improve. And so you're right. I think it's very, very important that we get into documenting. The only thing I'll say about this that I see go undiagnosed is concussion traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
Emergency rooms are not, as far as I understand it, designed to actually diagnose these kinds of injuries. They're designed to triage. So they're going to take a CT scan of your brain, which is like taking a Polaroid picture of your house and putting it on Zillow, right? You understand what the house looks like, but you're not going to sell it. The same goes for any sort of coup contra coup, whiplash related brain injury. Your brain's bouncing around in fluid inside your brain, inside your skull, and with the physics again, it's going to hit the front of your skull, hit the back. You're going to get injuries to your brain. You're going to get shearing injuries, and I could dive into the nerdiness of all this that I've learned. But really, the end game is get into your primary care doctor, explain to them that you have headaches, aversion to light, sound, whatever your symptoms are. You have to be very, very clear and very, very much an oversharer when it comes to your symptoms. That way, none of these things can go undiagnosed if you're telling your doctor everything.
Yeah, very, very true. And you are right. A lot of times we'll get patients that come in, they've already gone to the ER, and I'll notice that we've got a little bit of a slowness in response. They're having trouble remembering things. A little, maybe not major sensitivity to light, but enough to where we can see that their eyes aren't open all the way. Maybe even some slurring of speech. And at that time, we're dealing with post-concussion syndrome, so we gotta get them to a neurologist.
Right.
That way they can at least document and see what happens at that point. But you're right, the ER is really to triage, and they're trying to make sure it's not like a medical emergency. You gotta get in and have surgery on something because we got internal bleeding or something.
Right.
And that's what they're there for. But again, it's just another piece of the documentation story of knowing we're ruling all those things out. But yeah, those things, unfortunately, they do go undiagnosed more than they should. I mean, really, nothing should ever go undiagnosed, but those things are the most common. That is the last question I had submitted. Any other questions that you had off the top of your head that you get asked that we didn't cover so far?
Yeah, I think the only other thing, and I touched on it a minute ago, is, and we talked about it earlier, the value of your case. The sad reality is that sometimes the value of your case is really dependent on what the other driver's insurance looks like. And oftentimes they're not carrying valid insurance, or they're carrying very, very minimal amounts. For instance, a $25,000 insurance policy is barely enough to cover emergency room, ambulance, and physical therapy, just barely. So what I always tell clients is if you really want to protect your health and you really want to protect yourself, you need uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage, and you need probably $500,000 worth or more. That's what I carry. That's what I keep for my family. And that's because there are millions of drivers in this country that don't have insurance. They're just driving with no insurance. They don't care. They don't care what happens to you. They don't care how injured you get, and you don't have a recourse. You could sue them, but if they don't have enough money to pay for insurance, they don't have enough money to pay for your injuries. So you want to be able to carry uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage, because that's coverage, again, that you pay for, like MedPay.
Right.
You pay for that, but it's to protect you. So when you need it, you can turn to the insurance company and say, hey, my insurance company, I've been paying for this for 15 years and now I'm hurt and I need money to pay for my injuries, whatever the damages are, etc. And that is just an added level of protection and security that I think everyone should have.
Yeah, and to kind of emphasize that, you pay for insurance to eventually use it.
Right.
You don't pay for insurance to never use it. Otherwise, you should have never been paying for it in the beginning.
Right.
You want to get your money and your value out of it, so you should not be afraid to use your insurance when you need it. That's the whole point of insurance, you know? So yeah, making sure you are covered yourself, then you're 100% protected, because it doesn't matter what the other person has. You've got that coverage that you need, because again, it's all about, if you're not at fault, you shouldn't be getting stuck with a bill.
Right.
So why don't we do these protections, put these things in place to make sure it doesn't happen?
Everyone's scared their rates are going to go up. I don't want to make a claim with my own insurance because then my rates go up. Really, that's not how it works. If you cause the crash, if you cause somebody else injuries, yeah, your rates are going to go up, or they can drop you because you're a risk. If you're the end result, you're the person that got crashed into, your rates are not going to go up by using your insurance. That's what you've paid for. They expect that, and that's exactly the way it's designed.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So don't be afraid to use your own insurance if you need to. That was about it. Anything else you can think of?
No, really, I think documentation's the key. Get into your doctors as soon as you can and really get the ball rolling on your treatment so you can get better. And again, I think call a lawyer as soon as you can so that you can get the best advice and the best guidance you possibly can get.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for coming out. I hope this was really informative for everyone. We're probably going to have to do a part 2 and a part 3.
That'd be wonderful. Hey,
so we'll definitely do that. So if anyone has any other questions that we didn't answer, you can get in contact with either one of us, or you can email the question in, because we're going to have to do another one of these, I can tell you, which is great. You know, the information needs to get out there, because that means more people are going to be protected and know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's just going to make everyone's life easier, which is great. So,
yeah. And like you said earlier, these are questions we get every single day.
Yeah.
So the more we can get this information out to people, the better educated they are, and the better their outcomes will be. Yep,
100%. So you can get in contact with either one of us if you have specific questions, if you need either one of our help, if you need, if you've been in injury, you definitely are going to need an attorney if you've been in a car accident and have an injury. If you need to get checked out, you can give me a call. I don't know what's going on until I see you. That's what I always tell patients. I tell anyone who, attorneys I work with that referring, I don't know what's going on with them until I diagnose them and see them. So everyone's just so different. But once you get checked out, you're already on the right path, because then you know. And working with an attorney like John is great, because I can tell him, hey, this is what I found, and he automatically knows where to go, and he can fill me in, hey, well, this is what's going on with their insurance, and working together is the way it needs to happen.
Agreed, 100%. You want to have a good team on your side.
Definitely. All right, thanks guys for watching, and just reach out if you need anything.